Hey, welcome into this edition of the GASOCast, episode 16. New face, as you can see, he's back. Gaso Linden. This is episode 16 of the 23-24 season, and that's going to play into the grassroots season. Little house cleaning. Blue, our cup of hoops will drop probably tomorrow, Thursday.
Mhm. Yep.
Recruiting Simplified newsletter dropped this morning. Acting Bad broadcast will come back at some point. The Gaso Fast Break, Lyndon, you've been working on that. We got a Gaso Extra for you this week as well. And then King of the Court, fellas, we are live. Gaso season is back.
Yeah. I mean, and the cool thing about this one is that it's a little bit your non-traditional GASO. You know, we're always pushing 100 or 120 teams, but we knew coming into this that it was going to be a little bit smaller. And then the teams that decided that they were going to play with, you know, whether it's RNJ Elite, you know, or Urban, second to none's coming. Like, there's players that we are excited to go in there and start the evaluation process of the spring for those college coaches, and I'm pretty excited and pumped up, even though we're just a week out from crowning a state champion.
Absolutely. And speaking of state champion, let's kind of tie a bow at the end of the season and just kind of give our state thoughts. We're going to have a lot of content. Blue, you and I are going to touch on state a little bit on a cup of hoops. But let's give our rundown of our last thoughts. And Blue, I'll tip it off with you.
Yeah, mine's a little bit, away from the court and kind of more what the chatter was among the high school coaches around the UIL, what they're thinking going into like any type of rules committee here in June to get votes on, and that's, are they going to split each classification into two champions? I mean, we see it in football that they have a formula, they have the blueprint of how to crown multiple champions in each classification, and they're going to do it this in somewhat of the same way in the high school basketball season. Well, you could wind up having Division One, Division Two, which will kind of be broken up according to enrollment of each district. There's going to be things I think that they're going to have to work around. We don't know exactly all of the details, but we do know that it hasn't been determined yet. But the high school coaches kind of feel that this is going to pass once we get to June, and then of course the shot clocks were talked about heavily, and that's right around the corner, I believe. And so, that's my big thought and my takeaway, just because it was coming directly from the high school coaches. It was coming from their conversations with me, and then of course I was able to ask some questions along the way to other people, and that's what I like doing. And so I hopefully I'm going to get some more insight into all of this, and then present it to our audience.
Yeah, and you kind of mentioned, Blue, to me that it would look like you're still taking 4 teams from the playoffs, and then you divide them up within the playoff, correct? The biggest schools.
Correct. So, I mean, you're still going to have some of the largest enrollment
Yeah.
of schools. Like if you have
Allen will
three
always be
teams,
Division One, right?
oh, there's no question. But when you look at a district that's going to uh, be Plano East, Plano West, and Plano High, those are 3 out of the top 10 biggest schools in the entire state, regardless. So if all 3, and I don't know, I'm going to go back and look, and maybe one of our audience
Plano East
members.
been Division Two.
That's the thing, is that when was the last? Well, my question is, when was the last time that all 3 made the
Yeah.
state playoffs, and then one of those would fall down to Division Two? I don't know who has the lower number out of those 3, but that's basically their thinking, is to break up the Division One, Division Two within the districts. Even though you could have a Plano in a D2 in a Division Two of 6A.
So to wrap up, and I think this will help, instead of having a 128 team bracket, we're going to have 2 64 team brackets. Same amount of playoffs per division, playoff teams per division. It's just a smaller tournament, one less game. I get that. I guess that gives you, a little bit longer time off, or I don't know how that will look, but interesting nonetheless. My state thoughts were just, it was a little more predictable than we may have thought. You and I talked a lot about how wide open this was. And I think Plano East, what they really proved to me that it was never wide open. And just 40-0 dominance. How many programs have done that? I think I saw a tweet that said only 3 programs have pulled off that feat. And that may be right or wrong. I'm just pulling from the top of my head. But either way, not losing and beating a team of the quality of like Stony Point twice, you've solidified as yourself in history as a team that is unrivaled. Then you go to Lancaster. Their depth in 5A blue, they were just built for the run. And then
Yeah.
go ahead.
Well, what I was gonna come jump in here and say was that yeah, it might have been predictable. I think that as y'all have followed, our audience has followed us from show to show and from week to week. Is that yeah, we try to look for those loopholes. We try to find those teams that maybe could sneak their way in and and win a championship.
Sure.
Like my prediction of San Antonio Vets winning it all, was that crazy? Yeah, people thought I was crazy. People even told me in state that they thought I was crazy. But hey, we had them at number one for a reason. Why not? Why not kind of stick behind what I was saying in my narrative that I was going through all year long in order to make my argument that what, maybe they will win, maybe they can win, and so you've said it. In even I have talked to Matt Wester over the last couple of days, and when you face Plano East and they're going to get to that 40-0 mark, it just doesn't happen just because it was an accident. I mean, this is a team that really displayed and showed week game by game that they were going to slow grind you. You mentioned it before, Mass, is that what they were able to do was start the game, they get the lead, and they just build on that. We saw it against Stony Point. It was a 5-point lead, then a 9-point lead, then a 12-point lead, then a 13-point lead. Like, it just continued to grow that where it was kind of like poetry almost. I mean, we knew what to expect, that the average fan or the fan watching did not know what to expect. That's what it was all year long. And I will tell you this, and Lyndon can attest to this. When we went into that conference room after they won their by 16 or 17 points over Mansfield Lake Ridge, there was this pure enjoyment of just the team kind of being around each other, the satisfaction. Yeah, we have one more game to play, but that's what they had been building for since day one. That's what they've been building for 3 or 4 years. And so to hear Matt Wester in that conference room, there was a lot of just like, it was confidence, but it was a calmness, and there was never a sense of urgency or pushing through. We got to finish. There was there was nothing, Lyndon, here that really was going to knock them off their track. And I mean, you sat there through the final game to see it.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I talked about with Timmons. We're just kind of milling around on the court while the medals are being handed out Saturday night from their 6A championship game. And that's the deal, is that with Plano East, especially in the playoffs, you felt like you know what the recipe is. They're going to have DJ Hall do DJ Hall things, score in the double figures, and then one of their other guys is going to step up and be that other scorer. We saw that with Jordan Mizell in the semifinal where he had 13 against Lake Ridge, and then it was Rashard Angton in the final where he had 13 and just was really kind of their go-to guy. He had a clutch 3 to stretch the lead to 7, and from that point, they were just able to put the game under wraps kind of deal. I mean, this is a true team, and that's the one thing that I think that, that 40-0 mark that's going to be in the state program for years. People are going to talk about them right up there with the best, and that's that's the way to do it, is to build that way through. They took their lumps as sophomores, and they had a really good year.
I went and saw them at South Garland, and they were under 500 grinding.
Yeah. I mean, and last year they peaked their head up, looked like a contender. End up, Lake Highlands knocked them off. Is that correct?
Second round
in a really tight game. Yeah. But they they don't lose heart. They don't transfer. They don't demand for a new coach or anything like that. They just continue to get better, and 40-0 as a result with the state title to boot.
And they played together in the summer, essentially, too.
Yeah,
Like a lot of them
yeah,
played together. Just a really
Yeah.
special run. Yeah.
Mass, I want you to touch on a little bit here is that um, you got to sit back and really watch them, as you were live streaming and your perspective on it was spot on. Like, talk a little bit about it wasn't anything that Stony Point did wrong,
No.
because Stony Point deserves everything that they could have very well have been the state champs this year. It was, yeah, I mean, if you really think about it, going into this game, you were, well, I mean, even though they were so calm in this conference, in this press conference, it's you had to think, wow, how are they going to stop Josiah Mosley again? How are they going to stop the 3-point shooting, the passing? But you were going through a sequence with me, Mass, about how
Yeah.
it wasn't anything that Stony Point did. It was like the switching on the ball that Plano East was doing, their defense as a team.
Yeah, we haven't touched really on their defense, but I mean, it's just a clinic every time you watch them. There was a possession in, I think, the early to mid second quarter where Stony Point was making extra passes, and it was just like they were making the right pass every single time, and Plano East was still getting there, sprinting to contest, movement on the ball. It was just a clinic. I mean, all the basketball purists out there had to have loved what they saw on the defensive end from Plano East. It was spectacular, and like you said, Lyndon, just such a balanced team. Someone's always stepping up. They're just so confident. They have so many ways to beat you, and whatever they throw at you, or you throw at them, they can kind of just take it and say, okay, we'll play with you like that, and we'll adjust a little bit. They're just so dynamic, and that was kind of the narrative we've been talking about for the past 2 years with that group, just how good they are. I want to touch on Lancaster just a little bit here, and like they were just built for the run. I love their depth. It was great to see DeAntrell Barrett just make so many plays in the Amarillo game. He really sparked, I feel like, that early lead that was just the difference the whole game. And then Batee, 21 and 19, or 19 and 21 in the state final. Just he was a monster in the Colony game. He had more than 50% of Lancaster's points. He was dominant in the semifinal against Amarillo when Amarillo boxes out as good as anyone in the state, and then dominant, absolutely dominant in the state final. Lyndon, care to touch more on a little bit about Dylan?
Yeah. No, he was the best player on the floor, no matter how you slice it, and that's what matters the most when you get down into those high pressure situations where Amarillo would not go away. They cut it to 3, cut it to 4 a couple of times in the
Couldn't buy
fourth
a
quarter.
bucket.
And they shot 1 for 18 from 3. I mean, that doesn't happen in normal games with Amarillo. It was as tough as a shooting night as you're going to see. But they still were in this thing. They would turn to Bradenhausen to go get them a bucket. But every time it seemed like they were one possession away, that they were going to force their way back into the lead or something like that. Farron Douglas just said, hey, let's give the ball to the best player on the court right now and let him go do something productive. And he did every single time. And he always answered the bell for them.
Yeah, we'll just keep running it down here. I want to talk about just Oak Cliff Faith Family. They just played such a grueling stretch, right, of games. It's like they almost like went off the radar because they were playing so many national tough teams. And when you come back and you have the moxie of like, hey, we're not going to see better than we saw in December or whatever. We just got to take care of business and punish people. And that's exactly what they did.
Yeah.
When you watch them as a group, and they just know each other so well. I mean, they played a lot of teams outside the state of Texas also that prepared them for these moments, and probably prepared them to where they're just going to go dominate, because that's what they've done over the last few years. And so when you watch them out on the court, I mean, they're a college basketball team. Their size, their strength, their length, their ability to fly by guys in the open court. I mean, you just don't. You see it on teams with maybe 1 or 2 players, but not when you can go 6 or 7 deep.
Yeah, that was a
Yeah,
difference.
and when you have a player like Isaac Williams that can go off for 32 points and one of the most efficient 32 points you can have in a state title game. I was walking out of the press conference room and Jim Shaw, A&M Corpus, is standing right there with an ear-to-ear grin after what he just watched, and I don't blame him. But yeah, I mean, that team is just, they kind of sleptwalked a little bit through their first game in the semifinals against Stafford, but when it was put up time and Silsby was on the other end with Jared Harris and the dudes that they have, they were not messing around. They got right to it and won another 4-8. That's 3 in a row for them now.
I'm going to jump around here for a second. I know this is not in our notes. However, I want to focus on a couple of things here, and both of y'all can be able to talk on this. Is that when I'm looking at the stats here, I'm going to go back to the Lancaster game first, and then the second. Then we'll talk about Colleen Ellison for a second. But Lancaster, end of one, it was 6-2 Lancaster over Amarillo. Then it was 13-8. When I can't imagine Jason Pillion walking into that Amarillo halftime thinking that they weren't in this game. I mean, they essentially, to hold Lancaster to 13 points, you won the battle a little bit. You hadn't won the war, but you won the battle because you were one for 11.
And you're winning.
Yeah.
And it was that way all along. And then what just really sticks out, all of a sudden, there's a 23-15 scoring charge. All of a sudden, they between the two, they scored 38 points between the two in the fourth quarter alone. When it was going into the fourth quarter, it was I'm trying to do some quick math here. It was 21-16. I mean, just think about that. And that's when like Housen really did do a great job of going inside and trying to eat at Lancaster's length, which he kind of got the most out of at first. But when you're dealing with that much athleticism and that much length, it's very hard. And you can't hit your shots for whatever reason. Was it the dome? Was it nerves? So many balls went in and out. Like it's not.
Mm-hmm.
It was just uncharacteristic of how they can shoot the ball. And then you have Lancaster. And then y'all have any thoughts on?
I got 2 points.
Okay, go ahead.
The first is I kind of gave the recipe for an Amarillo win before, and the tempo was going Amarillo's way. They were getting great looks. They were moving the ball. They were making Lancaster work defensively, but the shot wasn't falling. And guess what? Lancaster was also doing? They were forcing turnovers. And then I'd be remiss to not talk about Plano East defense. Let's talk about Lancaster's defense in the final. They held Sean Parks, JoJo McIver, and Nashawn Parker to 5 of 28 shooting. Like, are you kidding me? Talk about just a lockdown performance in the state final. Guys that were flying around and talking about the semifinal again, just like Amarillo kind of had the tempo, but man, that's just another notch in the belt of a great team. If you can find a way to dig, scrape, and claw and find a way to win when games aren't going your typical, how you want them to go. Lancaster wants to get up and down. And you know what? Farron Douglas adjusted, and at the end of the second quarter, or at the end of the first or second quarter?
Second.
Said, no, we got a lead. We like where we're at. We're gonna buy some time. You come out and guard us, and that's why there were fireworks in the second half a little bit. But hey,
DeAndre Barrett played a huge role for them as far as finishing on the break and handling the pressure of Amarillo, and also I thought one thing that was taken away from Amarillo because of Lancaster's length was the ability to get to the backdoor pass. They could not get consistent with that.
I would agree. The speed of Lancaster's defense is something else. Lyndon, why don't we talk small schools? You're the best at that, man. You break it.
3A, we probably got the best of the championship games in terms of drama, comeback, all that stuff, where you have Ponder, who had a really tough road to get here. I'm sure you've seen the clip of Paradise holding the ball against them on social media where they stall an entire quarter, and that game ended up being 28-24. But they overcome Keaton Bristow and Holiday in the semifinals, and we end up with Hitchcock, who's the defending champ, been a wire-to-wire number one, and Ponder can't miss in the first half, similar to the semifinal where they're shooting the ball extremely well. You end up with a 10-point lead at halftime, but then they just don't have an answer for Damian McDaniel in the second half. And if you haven't seen Damian McDaniel, this is a second straight MVP award that this kid has won because he's just that dynamic. His mid-range jumper is something else. And then when he is playing and being active, man, he's a game wrecker on defense as well, and was able to just kind of take the ball from Ponder in big moments of the game and go finish on the other end, go create on the other end. So they ended up repeating in 3A, and one guy that I know that y'all are going to see a lot of in the next couple of years, and I'm going to make it a point to make sure that y'all see him in the 2A is Court Gaylor, who is a freshman who just was state MVP at the 2A championship game and dropped 27 points. I mean, he scored more than half of his team's points in both games, where this guy he's commanding, he's running the offense, he's making shots. And, for a freshman to do that, and they also have a 6'8" sophomore on the team like Lipan. They graduated a lot of dudes off of last year's state championship team. They end up going back-to-back this year, and wow, they are, very set up to be a dynasty where they're in these championship games a lot in the next 3 or 4 years.
Talk about how they got there, though. I mean, I don't think there was any controversy over it, but it took a couple minutes to kind of just settle everybody and then get the result.
And so, it's one of those things where it's something that hasn't happened at the UIL state tournament yet, where we have a video review that's not available at any other point besides the state tournament, where they can go look and see, was the ball out of his hand, etc. And so basically what you have is, by the NFHS rules, ball has to be a tip-in with 0.3 seconds or less. We're not catching it to shot. Everything has to be a tip. So they end up with that being the deciding factor in the game, where even though, the video clearly you see the ball is out of his hand by the time the red light goes on in the backboard, they adjudged that the clock did not start on time. So therefore they timed it. 0.3 seconds wasn't good. And then they cited that rule in their decision to overturn that bucket and award Lipan the victory in the semifinal game.
What a bunch of emotions, though, but we know that you can't catch then shoot. But
yes,
they thought that they had won that game, and then for it to be overturned by a rule that is very simple, it's
begs the difference.
So heartbreaking.
What about the 1A?
Grayson Rigdon was the story going in, but 32 points in each game for the nation's leading scorer. I mean, it's up there with performances in the history of 1A state game. But Jayden has been so close so many times. This is their fourth state appearance. They've all been in the past 5 years. They're runner-ups twice. They were semifinalists in one of these years. So this is their fourth trip, and they still haven't come home with the bouquet. But they were able to outlast this scoring rampage from Rigdon with two sophomores, Sean Standaland and Colt Gentry, who ended up being the MVP. Both of them highly promising players, and I expect to see them down here probably for the next 2 years coming out of Region 1 and 1A.
That's good stuff. All right, let's make a shift here, okay, to grassroots. I think it's time because we have an event this weekend, and we're gassed up to do it. So the question I threw out there, and we're not going to go too deep into kind of previewing the event. We're going to talk about post-event. We want the players to tell the story after the event happened. It's something we're very passionate about. But what's got you excited for this grassroots season? It's you get that inner. Every new season, you just get the energy buzzing. Blue.
It's always learning new faces, new names. I mean, there's so many guys that are 26s and 27s who either maybe sat the bench a little bit doing some learning or playing on JV, that they got a lot of minutes and got a lot out of their season. But we know probably from some buzz that will start happening that they're going to be on varsity next year, or that they're going to be a really big part of any team that whether they're part of the grassroots team or their high school team. And so I think that's really the exciting part is, seeing the old faces, but just to get to know new people and share a little bit of even our story as we go along through the spring and summer with them as as the company GASO, and what opportunities hopefully that we can bring for everybody.
That's good stuff, Lou. I'm going to go ahead and piggyback off that because, to your point, like players will be in new roles, and I love seeing kind of how how you play on the high school floor, and then how you play in this are sometimes completely different. You play different roles, and then seeing like a lot of these club teams are kind of like all-star teams. Like you're putting the best players and assembling them, and then seeing who the alpha of the alpha is. You know what I'm saying? I love seeing kind of those dynamics kind of play out, and you get a real feel um, for who's the dude. Players know players, and players know who the real ones are, and you get a real feel for that in grassroots.
Yeah, and my point that really I'm excited about is seeing who becomes a dude in front of our eyes. I'll use John Clark as an example last year where saw him during the high school season and he was really good. I'm like, this guy probably needs to go up in the rankings, et cetera, et cetera. And getting to see him extensively last summer really helped us kind of fill in the gaps on his game from an evaluation standpoint. And all of a sudden, he's the number one 2025 in the state.
Yeah.
Who's the next guy who can really, go from being a good prospect to a great prospect over the course of the summer, and being able to identify that kind of, just really gets me ready to get back in the gym this summer.
Well, we'll have the breakdown for you next weekend. Thanks for tuning into this GASOcast, and we'll see you next time.